Welcome to tonight's episode of the Book Club. Today we are focusing on 3 recent books which have appeared about the city of Karachi, a city which all of us know very well, yet a city many aspects of which are revealed in these books, and we will be talking about the history, the diversity and the geographical makeup of Karachi through the years. Our first guest is Yasmin Lari, the well-known architect, historian, who has done a lot of work on the conservation of the city and other parts of the, she has worked in other parts of the country also. She is the author of this fascinating book, Karachi, the Dual City, and I think it's now in its second edition, and we'll be talking about this book. Welcome, Yasmin. Our second guest is the very well-known Anwar Muraj, who is a journalist, columnist, and he has been the first editor, one of the first editors of the Herald, he has been telling me, and a very distinguished writing career. Mr. Anwar Muraj, along with Hamida Khodo, who is not with us today because of certain personal reasons, he has edited a book called Mega City of Our Times, and this is a series of articles on Karachi. So, we will be talking about this book. And the third book that we have with us is a selection of literary writings on Karachi, and it's called Look at the City from Here. So, talking about Karachi and the different aspects with which these 3 books have been dealt with. So, I want to go back and start from the very past of Karachi, and I will begin this question from Yasmin, because very often it is sort of assumed that Karachi is a city which does not really have a past. You have the present, and that's about it. So, tell me a bit more about the past, and especially how or what aspects of the past have you focused in on your book, because you begin with the Raj and the career that Karachi had, its very humble beginnings before the Raj.
Well, you know, as if when I started the book, it was way back in the late 80s and early 90s, and the general feeling was that there's nothing much that you can find about Karachi. So, as I delved through papers and documents and so on, it seemed that Karachi actually was there at the time of Alexander when he came around here, and this was the crocodile that he wanted to actually build. He had to go back hurriedly, so that never came to pass, but obviously the forces had come here, and his Admiral Nearchus then took the route and went along to Persia. But Karachi obviously had seen those forces.
So, Yasmin, if you if you take back Karachi's beginnings to the times of Alexander, right, then it gives several more centuries to the city, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, as you go through the papers and you find the documents, you see that in 18th century there was a lot of traffic on the sea, basically from Karachi. Lieutenant Porter arrives from England at that time, and then from then on, I think it's possible to piece together as to what happened. But see, when I started working, I was really interested to see how the buildings came about. How was it that Karachi got this fantastic kind of architecture which doesn't exist anywhere else? And it was very important.
The colonial, the Raj architecture.
The Raj architecture. But you know, we have to understand the Raj architecture is not only done by the British. There were our people involved in this. So you see a lot of different,
right,
you know, you see a lot of different kind of motifs brought in by our artisans who built the buildings. So it was very important to see which areas developed first and how. But of course, it was Napier who had the foresight to, you know, have this fishing village turned into a big mega city. He's the one who said, would that I could come back Karachi to see you in your grandeur. And the British did a lot to develop it, obviously. They had their own reasons, of course. I mean, they wanted to have a port. They wanted to have a port from which they could take away a lot of, you know, raw material from the subcontinent to Britain and so on and so forth. But it's very interesting how when British came to Karachi, when Napier annexed Sindh and came to Karachi, there was a kind of a fortified town. And there was the Karadar and the Mitadar. The Karadar was the one that opened onto the sea, and the Mitadar opened onto the river Malir, and so on. So there's all that is there, and from maps you actually, you know, see a lot of things that you won't otherwise know. So I was very lucky when looking for the papers. I found some maps which dated back to 1874.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is how one was able to really build together a whole historical you know, aspect of the city as to when it developed, why it developed, which communities actually became prominent when. So we see that Parsis were the first ones, because they could speak English language, and they could, I mean, they were very much part of the, the British wars, like the first.
And also involved in trade.
In trade, but mainly because of the wars where Anglo-Afghan war, as you know, happened in 1839. And so from then on, you see a lot of Parsis coming forward. Then the next were, I think, mostly the Hindu community. Then there were the Goa Portuguese, or rather the Goan Christian community that came about. And Muslims were the last, because they did not really take up, English language and Western education until much later.
So that's a fascinating story and a fascinating mixture. But I wonder, and I would like to turn now to Anwar Murad Sahab and ask this question, that this sense of history is often not known to many of Karachi's citizens, and they often tend to forget that Karachi has come through a long period of time. And I wonder, why is this absence of a sense of history about Karachi?
I think it's very unfortunate. I can't really put my finger on the basic reason, but I do remember even when I was a schoolboy and we had migrated from India, and I spent 1 year at the grammar school, I noticed there was a kind of a reluctance to learn history. There was more emphasis on literature and the language and so on, but I found that there wasn't very much interest in history.
History in general, you mean, not
yes,
particularly about
yes,
Karachi?
History in general. Yasmin made one very interesting comment, which I'd like to add to, when she was talking about some of the things that the British had done. One of the greatest achievements, I think, was the railways, because it made the hugeness of India graspable. You were able to travel from one part of the subcontinent to the other part. This is a great
everything
achievement.
came literally within reach.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the other, of course, was the telegraph system and so on.
Yes, Anwar, it's interesting that you mentioned the railways. I've just happened to have finished my book on Pakistan Railways, which was just published actually last week. And the first railway line in Pakistan was actually from Karachi to Kotri in 1861.
1861?
1861, and there was none other but John Brunton, who was there. And they're the ones, the two brothers who also wrote a book, and these are two brothers. One did the one in the Sindh railway, and the other one was doing the Punjab railway. And the Sindh railway, of course, used a lot of bricks from Mohenjo-daro, from the Indus Valley. A lot of ballast that you see under the railways was actually taken from these archaeological sites.
Oh, really?
Absolutely, and that's how the British built always. They took a lot of things from wherever they were and they used them. And this happened in buildings also. Like, Napier's brother, William Napier, who was a general, he actually used recycled wood from Bombay to build barracks in Karachi. So there was a lot of all this that was going on during the British time, where they were trying to save money but rule this enormous empire that they held. But they were very careful, and they to use whatever they could. But Karachi, I think, developed enormously actually in the 1860s. And
I see, after the British conquest.
After the British conquest, obviously before that it was not a village actually, it was a kind of a trading post. But once the British took over and once Napier made it the capital of Sindh, then of course there was Bartle Frere that I'm sure that you mentioned in your book, as I recall.
Yes.
And Hamida, of course, has written a whole thesis on that. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So, but it's very interesting that you talk about how recycled products were used to build up Karachi even in those days.
Yes.
It's time for us to take a short break, and then we'll come back to this interesting discussion on Karachi's history and its present fortunes.